Okay, thank you very much. So yes, I'm going to be talking about the development of interactive dashboards that we're integrating into the BigDB platform, which is used to host the MRF genome library and all the databases on PubMLST. So the reason we're interested in developing dashboards is that they offer a number of advantages to end users and to curators of the databases. They give us a rapid overview of the current state of a database or project, and they also make the data more accessible to all kinds of users, because you don't necessarily need to understand how to query the database. You look at a dashboard and get an overview, but it can also sort of educate users into how they can create queries, because you can link directly from a dashboard into a query page, which sort of pre-populates a query that's used to generate the data for the dashboard. And then finally, it's a means to identify trends in the data. Patterns may sort of jump out from visual elements that you may not even be looking for yourself. So this is very much a sort of a work in progress, but we now have a dashboard framework built into the development version of BigDB. And this is an alternative front end to the database. And with this, it allows us to break down individual fields within the database and display these using sort of different visual elements. Now, each of these elements are independently updated from the database, and we are restricted to looking at sort of breakdowns of individual fields, because this structure has to appear quickly. So the data has to come from the database rapidly. So we can't show sort of complex visualizations on the front page, but we will have a way from going from these fairly simple breakdowns into some more complicated sort of drilling down into the data. And I'll sort of explain a bit more about that later. What an end user will see will very much depend on who they are, because different users have access to different data within the database. The databases can hold private information, and so if you're logged in as a user, you may see different values than if you're sort of a casual user. And for that reason, the database has to be generated live, and it sort of can't be pre-calculated. And that sort of reiterates why we need to make the front end sort of fairly linking to individual fields. So I'll talk about some of the visual elements that we have available. The simplest of these is what I call the big number, and this is it's the obvious way of sort of showing a count of sort of the total number of isolates or the total number of genomes within the database. Each of these is the big number is sort of customizable by users. You can change the color, aesthetic elements of the display. So you'll notice there's a sort of a watermarked icon sort of behind, and that can all be varied. There's a choice of about 30 that you can choose. But you can also set the rate of change to display sort of how many new isolates have been added into the database over a period of time. And the duration that we're interested in, the duration of that rate of change can be selected as well. So you can look at over sort of previous year or previous month or so. And then finally, there's a way to link from that visualization directly into the data itself. So any element that has a sort of little arrow in the bottom will take you directly to the sort of results table that shows all the isolates that are represented. Now, the big number display can also be used to look at the individual frequencies of specific values for any of the fields in the database. So you might, for instance, be interested just in knowing how many serial group B isolates you have in the database. So you can set that up, say, I'm interested in capture the field capsule group. I only want to look at Bs, and you'll get that number. And likewise, you get this sort of the rate of change, just like you would for all the isolates in the database. You're not limited to just choosing a single value, though. You can actually choose a list of values to include within that visualization. And another way of displaying sort of field value frequencies is to use this gauge chart. And this is showing exactly the same data, but the gauge also gives you an indication of the proportion of this whole data set that's represented by a particular value. And as with, the other charts I showed you, you could go directly to a filtered view of the data set by sort of clicking that link in the bottom right corner. And when it comes to the breakdown of different fields, then we have a choice of different visualizations that we can use. Everyone's familiar with pie charts. We also have donut charts, which are essentially the same, but a lot of people prefer it visually. It's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. But also we have tree maps. I think these work particularly well on a dashboard sort of framework, because they are displayed sort of in a rectangular shape, and the tree map allows you to use more of the area to actually convey useful information. Now, all of the elements within the dashboard are interactive, so you can hover over any of the segments within the display, and then you'll get a tooltip that will show the exact frequencies and percentages of particular values. So we have other displays available more for sort of continuous values. So in particular, time-based values, so like the year of isolation, or sort of or for looking at the total number of isolates that have been added to the database over time. We can use sort of bar charts and cumulative line charts. And then for data sets which are more global in nature, then we can display those using a world map, and we can break down that information both by country and by continent, so that the database knows which continent every country is in, and so is able to summarize those on a continent chart. And all of these can be customized using different palettes, so you can sort of change the look and feel of the dashboard to fit how you like. And as with the other elements, you can hover over individual countries to get the exact values that are found there. So the final visual element that I'll talk about is also very simple. It's just a list of values. Although it's very simple, it can actually be very, very useful. And one of the main advantages of it, apart from being very easy to generate, is that it uses text values to list the values. You can hyperlink a text value very easily. So in this case, you can click anywhere, any of the items within the list, and it will then take you directly to the database page that shows the results from that list. And this is where I was talking about it being a sort of a way of educating casual users as to how they can go into the database and make a query, because you don't need to know anything about how the query interface works. You go from the dashboard, you click that link, and then you know that you can use that sort of drop-down box element to search based on any of the fields that are present within that data set. So it's really a way of improving the accessibility. So every element that's on the dashboard can be scaled, and that's really up to an end user how they want to display it. Some elements work much better as big blocks. For instance, the world map, you really want to display that in a sort of bigger format. But every element can be displayed at any size that you want, scaled to this grid system. And we've had to do quite a lot of effort has gone in to make sure that all the labeling works properly at every scale. So labeling of the visualization is actually one of the biggest problems, because it has to work really at very small levels, and you don't want to be sort of overwhelmed by a load of cluttered labels which overwrite each other. So you'll see, so on a big visual, then sort of the legend is positioned, towards the bottom left. As you go for a smaller tile, then we have to move the legend so that it all fits on. And when you go to then a very small, sort of 1 by 1, so the smallest element is 150 pixel square, we remove the legend altogether because it's just not useful to try and include it. But as before, you can hover over any of the elements to actually see the values underneath. So, as I sort of implied, the dashboard is fully customizable by an end user. Users can add or remove any of the fields in the database onto their own personal dashboard. They can choose which visualizations they want to include, and they can modify sort of the aesthetic touches of any of those elements. They can choose different colors for the charts. For the maps, you can choose about 15 different palettes or so, and you can choose the sizes. And these all align onto this grid-based system, but the position of each of those elements can also be moved just by dragging and dropping the elements using a mouse. And all of that is remembered between sessions. So when you come back to the database later, everything will be in the same position, but will be updated live from the database. It also will adjust to any screen size, so it doesn't matter what device you're actually looking at the dashboard on. But you might realize that if you were trying to use a mobile phone to look at this, you wouldn't necessarily want to see 15 graphical elements all stacked up one on top of each other. So you can also set elements to be hidden on small devices, so that on a mobile phone you might just want the big numbers giving you the total numbers that are present in the database, and then only when you're looking on a sort of laptop screen you'll see the whole dashboard. So because of the requirement to update the screen, to update the dashboard quickly on the front end, those front end elements are limited, as I said, to breaking down single fields, partly because they need to be updated quickly. Generally, we want all the elements on the dashboard to be available within about a second of loading the page. But also we don't want to put a big load on the database server. Every time somebody goes to the front page of the database, we don't want a massive spike of processing that's required to populate the dashboard. So we limit the front end just to single fields. But where we're sort of developing this is that from a particular field element, we'll be able to drill down further into the data to explore how that field can link to other fields within the database. So, for instance, you might go from a field that's showing you a breakdown of your capsular group, and you say, well, actually, I'm interested in how that relates to different clonal complexes. And then from that, you'll be able to go into this data exploration page and sort of say, I'm interested in clonal complex, and show this as a Sankey chart, and then you'll be able to get this sort of Sankey representation. And so this is data that's from the MRF genome library, but this doesn't exist yet. This is a mock-up. The dashboard itself does exist, but this is coming. So at the moment, this is a front-end dashboard. This is just a sort of alternative way into the database, but we intend for it to be applied for any sort of at different levels within the database itself. So you can have it as a customized dashboard for individual projects within a database, or indeed for publications, or specific field values. So you might want to set up a dashboard that just talks about serial group B isolates, and the elements you want to include on that might be different than a dashboard you set up for some other purpose. And so you'll be able to set up multiple dashboards for different purposes, looking at different aspects of the data. And this one is a one I've done for the MRF genome library. And you see we're restricted to the metadata fields that we have available. But see that we can, you've got the year and we got the Bexero and the true member values there available, sort of tree maps. And you'll see with the capsule group that it's because that's just a small tile that we sort of hide a lot of the legends, but it's all available by hovering over it. And then so the final slide is just talking about where we're going. So as I say, this is very much a work in progress, but I think you've got an idea of the direction of travel that we're going in. So the next thing so the actual dashboard framework is now largely finished. The main visual elements are available. The next bit really is to develop this data exploration page, and to provide a way of adding adding filtering to the front page, because it just shows a breakdown of the whole database, you might want to provide some filtering to that. Say, for instance, you might only care about the last 5 years of data. You don't necessarily want to see everything from all time. So we may be able to have some basic filtering on the front page to restrict the data set in that way. The other sort of obvious use of how we could take a dashboard would be to use it to display the results of a query. So at the moment, if you do a data query, then you get a table of results. But if you've set up a dashboard that gives you the results, that gives you the data in the way that you want to see it, then there's no reason why we can't use that to as an option to show the results directly from data queries. And then finally, we're giving some thought to generating sort of customizable summary reports that users will be able to set up themselves to get a quick overview of what's in the database. So yes, just quick acknowledgements. All the developments of the dashboard have been funded by the PubMST Biomedical Source Grant for the Wellcome Trust. That's awarded to Martin and Angela Brueggemann and myself. And Margaret Varga is a visual analytics specialist who is employed on that grant and has been working with me to make this happen. Thank you.